Now, the reason why I'm bringing my laptop is because, well, it's two reasons really. It's because I don't intend to speak from the heart. One, like what he was saying about my chairperson there. I'm going to use this laptop, I'll read from it. The second reason is because he kept saying, Thando, I don't know why I'm the one who's in radio and you're not because you talk too much. Even last year I experienced that situation, so I'm just gonna read, but understand that what I'm reading is from the heart, right? Makos, are we good? Am I good so far? All right, thank you. Okay, anyway, guys, let's do this seriously on a serious note. Program director, KUMISA board members, our esteemed speakers, stakeholders and partners, distinguished guests and dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. I'm delighted that we've all agreed together on this very momentous occasion this morning in honor of the South African music industry and to discuss how we might further economically transform it so that its value chain, you know, something we hardly consider, its ecosystem, can function effectively within a level playing field of fair competition. And please note the word fair competition as an operative word because we find our industry floating with lots of people who work in it not knowing their positions in it, not knowing where their income streams are. And at times we have to tell you, look, you've been looking at one particular income stream of your career, and yes, you were successful at it, but you missed out on 5 other income streams. And in this industry, there's this saying that says, if it gets played, it gets paid. And that simply means, if it does get paid, that means someone's collecting. And there's a chance that it might not be you, the owner, who's collecting. But trust you me, someone will collect. So we want to fix our industry. So in this event, you, the music industry professionals, stakeholders, private and public, you know, the lawmakers, we coming together now to discuss the challenges preventing the industry's growth and how to position the sector effectively for positive economic growth, especially after the industry had a negative impact. And it suffered a negative impact because of COVID-19. We had to shut down and we were super exposed because everyone understood the income stream that comes from the live music sector. But what about the royalties? What about brand equity? What about so many other facets of this industry that we hardly speak about? So even though we operate in a multi-billion rand industry, there's still massive economic, value, and income gaps that see many in our industry opting for fame as a measure of success without much economic return. While those who control resources tend to monopolize our market unfairly at times, because it's not all of them. But trust you me, there are who do that. If you don't know where your money is, and I happen to know it, I'm gonna exploit it. So we wanna change those gaps, those information and knowledge gaps. It starts there. Know your worth, know where your money is, and go out there and negotiate a contract that works for both parties concerned, because if it's negotiated down the middle, it'll work for those that are participating in it. So the question begs, do we have adequate laws and regulation to ensure that those who operate in our industry all get a fair chance of success? And to lead us into these discussions, we've invited industry professionals to tackle topics we feel will propel us towards the right direction. For instance, we've invited Ubaba, Umawawa, Uromio Qetsimani, the SG of the South African Music Industry Council, otherwise known as SAMIC, to talk about the function of the regulating agencies in the South African music industry and the efficacy of the sector's current laws. Now, this will include, but won't be limited to, the Copyright Amendment Bill, the Performance Protection Bill, especially since we're about to enter into public consultations around the bills. And I've asked him also to maybe just touch on quite a number of other things that pertain to legislation in our industry, and maybe even highlight some of the inconsistencies that exist between the existing, the current bills that I'm talking about, and the treaties that we've signed. Because all of these things affect musicians, they affect people who work in the music industry, but these are things that we concern ourselves the least about. When I travel to another country, what is my right as a South African musician? Where's my money coming from? There's law around things like that, but we don't really get to concern ourselves or even discuss things that remotely reflect this. So Romeo will cover that. Then we've got another speaker, Mainaleng Mapige, an attorney at law, and also the MD of Mapige Incorporated, who will share her legal opinion with us about legal frameworks and if they can improve the music sector's standard operating procedures, if we have any. And I want to ask, do we even have standard operating procedures in this industry? It's an industry I've heard people say, so disorganized, so fragmented, all the negative words you can think of. And kahle kahle, if I can ngishaya ngesizulu, asihlangene vele. Asiyona imbumba. We compete with each other to the level that growth is almost impossible to achieve. We're looking at things like that. And I also, like for instance, when we talk about these things, we talk about the use of copyright, understanding the copyright laws and making them work for our benefit. For instance, I'll make an example. There are so many places that play music for public consumption. My question to you in this particular aspect is, did the musicians, or do the musicians, or we as industry, do we let them know that when music is played in a public place, usually there needs to be a user license that's paid, so that the person whose music is played for public consumption can actually get their royalties and get paid? Do people know that, for instance? Whose job is it anyway to tell them that? Is it government? Is it the CMOs who collect on that behalf? Is it organizations like KUMISA, industry organizations like SAMIC? Is it the Federation, SIFSA? Who? Who's supposed to do that work? But before we can put it into the hands of the people or those organizations, artists themselves need to know what their rights are. Anyway, the next speaker, before Umakosi kicks me out, is Uwendi Verwey Becker, friend of ours for a long time now. She works with Ditto Music as the regional manager for the African region. And she will share her thoughts around music streaming, because that's another bone of contention. A lot of people are saying, whoa, value gaps that exist in the space. I know I made this example to you last night, Wendy, where I've even listened to people saying, I prefer downloads. When iTunes, if someone wants my song, they will buy it for 9.99 Rand. So say 9.99 Rand times 1 million gives me almost 10 million Rand, isn't it, right? Whereas in streaming language, what is it? So there are people who are saying things like that, and she opened my mind about how this thing actually works and how it's supposed to work. I was so fascinated. I can't wait to hear her talk about things like that, so that we are open in our thinking and that we do things from an informed position. That's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to get industry to talk to each other. So this is not a workshop. This is us literally having a dialogue that possibly can amount to something where we can even go to policymakers, to lawmakers and say, this is what the industry is saying. How can we change? Do we need to regulate or do we need to self-regulate? Right. So she'll be talking, and the question she'll be answering is, does music streaming or the music streaming industry, does it need regulation? Does it need to be regulated? So she's going to answer us on that one. Our second last speaker would be someone who is, I would say, He is a legend in the space. He has been around in different areas, in different segments of our industry. He's been with Samro. He's been in the public space, public sector. He's been everywhere. A man I respect very much. His name is Andre Leroux. And weird enough, I was not even calling for him to come here. I contacted the South African Cultural Observatory because of their research and the research that they do around the creative industry as a whole. And they said, we know just the person to send. And that happens to be Mr. Andre Leroux, who also happens to be the managing director at IKS Consulting. So he'll share his opinion. When I was telling him how I'm going to introduce him, I said he's going to share his honest opinion. And then he said, honest? Can we deal with that word, honest? So I hope you're going to be honest up here, brother. Because this industry is not necessarily known for that to some, instances, but I know that we've got the best of the best that will talk. But your opinion will basically be around the question if there's a need for a music service provider code of practice and standardization of music-related tariffs. Where do we get our rates from, the rates that we charge? How do we determine market-related tariffs for music industry-related services, and how do we even tell if we're being exploited or if the deal is fair? Do we need a special antitrust body or tribunal in this instance to actually make sure that anything that we charge is a fair amount of whatever we're charging? How do I know what my worth is when someone asks me? Or do I just go get booked and someone says, hey, Thando, I want to book you, but I only have 3,000 rand. And I say, 3, not even 5? He says, look, bro, if you're not going to take 3, I know someone who's going to take it. How do we change that thinking? How do we change how we respect our industry, how we look at our industry, and how do we even put out to those who book musicians and those musicians who get booked, how do we create an environment where they cut it down the middle because they each understand the worth that they bring into the pot? Andre Leroux will talk to some degree on that element. Lastly, we have Ubaba Umhlanganisi Masocha, who loves the music industry, who loves the creative industry, and he comes from the National Department of Small Business Development in the directorate that deals with sector development. I feel that was so necessary because we're trying to build a music sector. So we want to hear what government has to say. And he's going to inform us on government perspective with an emphasis to small businesses that operate within our sector. If legislation, for instance, or regulation can foster positive change and create an enabling environment. So that's what we are going to, the crux is about that. That's what we're going to talk about, right? Now, the speakers will each have about 10 minutes, after which, and this is where they'll talk on the subject, uninterrupted, share their opinions for 10 minutes each. After which, you, the audience, the industry, will engage, and I encourage you to engage, in a discussion where we either correct a narrative, contribute to the topic, or maybe even ask for clarity, but we need to find each other. And if you feel that what you want to ask or what you want to contribute is a bit controversial, we welcome controversy because that's how we build the industry. So let's talk. And it's our hope to establish a working document that will eventually become somewhat of a resolution that can be submitted to policymakers across the board as an advocacy for policy. We hope to inspire robust discussions that will lead to positively fixing and empowering our wonderful industry. And while we also get to enjoy some amazing music, like from Roshanda over here, we will also witness, and I think this is another part that is going to make for, something to share on social media, something to enjoy. There is an unsuspecting legend amongst us who is going to be awarded just for his role in the music industry. He thinks he's just here to perform. Little does he know that there's another plan for him today. And I'm so grateful that everyone around us is going to get to witness that very special moment, because the idea is to celebrate our own while they live. You give them work and you also celebrate them. You give them roses and you talk about them. So we will honor one of our unsung music heroes, and we're happy to have all of you here to witness this wonderful occasion. And with that said, please kindly participate once again and contribute to the discussions, because your views are what will turn our industry around. And with that, please allow me to say thank you and welcome to the KUMISA Music Business Brunch. I thank you.